and welcome to Mindful Makers, a show that encourages us to approach our lives with an element of curiosity and celebrate those who are passionate about improving our state of being. I'm Sahar, your host for the show, and today I'm sat with a man who has made it his life's mission to help us reduce our exposure to excessive EMFs. If you've been following us through season 1, you'll know that EMFs stands for Electro Magnetic Frequencies, which, let's be honest, isn't at the top of everybody's list. But a little curiosity can certainly do no wrong. And speaking of curiosity, that is exactly what makes today's guest so special. He followed his curiosity and worked extremely hard since he was 15 to explore this topic, and today he sits before me, having founded a company called Waveguard, where he is head of research. What's even more remarkable about him is that the device he invented was awarded Invention of the Year by the European Association of Inventors. So without giving away too much, let's start the show. Please welcome EMF coach and founder of Waveguard, Hagen Thiers. Welcome, Hagen. It's really, really lovely to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. I'm enjoying my new life here in Dubai, and so nice to be here with you today.
So we met recently at the Biohackers event where you were presenting and telling us more about what your invention was and the reasons why it came to be. And I remember that I posted some snippets from your presentation on the Sorsha Edits Instagram page, and I got so much feedback on it. People were so curious. A lot of people had no idea about the effects of EMF. And it really made me think that, this curiosity deserves to be pursued because there's a conversation that we can be having about it in public. We're surrounded by EMFs all the time. So why not bring you on the show and nourish the community even further?
That is so nice. Yes, it's something which we should be much more mindful about. And it's something, I guess, which is putting us into some kind of harmony and some kind of connection, that we are both having this work of trying to bring some mindfulness about people's lives and educate them about that. And for me, that was starting when I was around 15 years. That started for me to really take off when I was, you could say, in a digital detox for around 3 months. I was living in a national park in Finland, and there was no electricity, there was no tap water, there was no cell phone signal, and there was not even air pollution. It was one of the last 10 places, and this is of course obviously now over a decade back, almost 2 decades soon, that it was one of the last 10 places on Earth where there was zero air pollution. And I spent there a couple of months, and you really get into your own being again. You start again to be mindful about how you start to notice changes in you and how you notice that your body is going again into a synchronization with nature. And when I then came back to the society, especially my EMF sensitivity was just going to a next level, to something which was unbearable for me. And this is when I noticed, okay, this is something which I have to dedicate more of my life to help people with the same problems like myself.
So you basically experienced firsthand what it felt like to immerse yourself in a world where there are very low EMFs, because there are natural EMFs that, are around the world, which are naturally generated by the environment in which we live. And that's what I remember, that electrical fields that are produced by local buildup of charges in the air and the atmosphere, and that's connected to thunderstorms. Fish and birds use the Earth's EMFs to navigate, but that's natural and it's needed. But what you're saying is you removed yourself from all human-made EMFs.
Yes, and the difference is quite severe. We have this natural EMFs, which we are exposed to, these fields, which are coming, for instance, also from the sun or just from the earth itself. But they are usually not polarized, they are usually not pulsed in any way, they are very harmonic. They are in a very low frequency, like the Schumann resonance with around 8 hertz. And this is also something which is even essential for us in some way.
Absolutely.
And so we have those natural frequencies and these natural fields we are lived in, and which we were in our evolution going through that, and we are used to that. And nowadays we are producing electromagnetic fields and frequencies in a very different way.
Yeah.
And they are in a much higher frequency.
Yeah.
For instance, when we are comparing our brainwave, which is also measured in hertz, and we are looking at our current 5G signals, we are speaking of up to over 1 billion times a higher frequency.
Wow.
So it is 9 zeros just for us to remember. So if we're comparing our brain waves, which is going from around 1 hertz up to 20, 30, 40 hertz, which we are using there to communicate our signals, and we're looking at the 10 gigahertz 5G tower, where you're looking there at 1 billion times more. And it's the same communication signal pathway. Our body is trying to communicate. We're communicating here. And it's like a constant noise which is around us, which is interfering with our own being. And it's something which is making it very hard for our body to live in a normal, peaceful way.
Yeah, I think there's something about that as well, because when I looked on the World Health Organization website, they mentioned that most of these man-made EMFs are at such low frequency that their effect is mainly on heating tissue, which sometimes you feel when you got the phone in your hand or you feel the phones to your ear for a really long time, your head gets a bit hot. But having said that, they said some of the side effects could be headaches, low libido, problems with circulation. They've actually mentioned it as possible side effects. And I think the way that I would interpret that is probably that, yes, they are low amounts of frequency, but when they're aggregated, there's so many of them and we're surrounded by so many everywhere we go that it tends to add up. Is that correct? Do you think that assumption is?
I think it's even a little bit more drastic than that, to be honest. The thing is, there's a huge amount of economy interest behind all of our technologies. And usually there is a big influence on that. And just in our world, it takes times, and it takes a long time for negative parts of our life to be resolved, even through studies are occurring. And the World Health Organization is a very slow reacting format, you could say. There has been, if there is studies being presented, and I saw this, that there was major studies being presented to the world.
Like 25,000 studies have been done over the last 30 years around this subject.
That is kind of correct. There is a lot of that, and they're showing thousands of them show really hard impact. And just recent years, they have been submitting from public agency, they have been submitting so harsh showing studies that the World Health Organization said, okay, we're going to reevaluate the status of the danger of these levels. But they are giving themselves just for that time of 5 years to just reevaluate the old stages from a couple of years ago. So our processes to bring our safety limits up to a new standard is very slow. And if we're looking at that, for example, and comparing that to smoking, smoking was being promoted as healthy for pregnant women, for athletes and so on in the 20s of the last decade.
I remember those ads because I remember looking at different campaigns over time and how they've evolved when it comes to marketing messages. And it blew my mind to see the way that cigarettes had historically been marketed.
Yes.
For all sorts of things.
Yes.
Even doctors were endorsing it.
It is true. And it took 37 years until a public recognition happened to say, okay, it's not good for you. And it was still being allowed to just buy it normally. It was not said, okay, we're going to ban smoking now. You had to make a mindful choice about it.
Yeah. An informed decision.
It's exactly that. They're going to take their time, and it can take just 4 decades, almost like with smoking, until the point is reached that they say, okay, this is dangerous. And we have to understand it's already evaluated at the same level now as tobacco, as possibly cancer-causing. It's the same level from the World Health Organization. Radiation is already being categorized.
As carcinogen.
Yes.
So looking at those kind of facts around it, it makes you think, with the 25,000 articles of research that have come out over the last 30 years. And, that's a lot of research. And I think it's actually more research than has been done into some chemicals, which is shocking. So there must be something in there that is causing curiosity, but also warrants a need to be able to be examined.
Well, obviously, we are all using radiation devices. We're all using a cell phone nowadays. We're all usually exposed to Wi-Fi. And even if we are choosing nowadays to take a similar path like I was and to go in an area where you're completely shut off from such devices, you're still gonna have a 5G Starlink satellite system, which is gonna be exposing you to EMFs. You cannot escape it. You're always exposed to it. And that makes this danger much more.
Yeah.
And you have no choice. And that's why I think it's especially big public interest to investigate that.
Right.
And to see what is the long-term effects of that. And we know there is energy production, there is effects happening. The studies are showing this. And it started with, there was a change around 2000, year 2000. A change happened that not anymore companies had to present research before launching new technologies to show and prove that it was safe, but the customer had to show it caused damage to them and ask for damage repair. And then we are very fast into a David and Goliath scenario where we are fighting in front of a court and we have to sue as a private person major corporations for technology they have launched. And for instance, radiation is one of the things which even an insurance will not cover you. You can get pretty much anything insured, but for instance, not really any dangers or cancers from EMFs.
Right, because it's still technically not been researched enough to be able to...
Oh, you can almost research anything, you know. I believe that the studies, they have been shown that there is a big impact on our body. It shows that there's almost in every part of our body some impacts. It starts with our brain waves. It starts and continues obviously with heat production and things like that. But for instance, one of the things I encounter the most is literally sleeping disorder.
Sleeping disorder.
Sleeping disorder is for me the problem which I encounter as people coaching people about it the most often. And it's still one of the issues I have to face with, being still EMF sensitive. And I still have the same problem that if I don't take the right precautions, I'm still tremendously losing my own sleeping quality if I'm exposed to a 5G.
Well, it's really tricky as well because we're surrounded everywhere we go. And short of going to live in a cave or some remote place, it's impractical. You know, we need Wi-Fi, we need technology, we need to communicate. There's so many wonderful things that it brings to our lives. But what would your tips then be for being able to mitigate that in some way or reduce the impact in our lives of the severity of how much we have exposure?
You can make very conscious choices to start and to reduce your exposure. 80% of your radiation levels which are exposed to your body, you have control over. They come from your own devices.
So phones, tablets, laptops.
Exactly. This is where it starts. And here I'm living now in Dubai, and we are going back to wired solutions. It is faster. I have reconnected my apartment. I have connected to Ethernet cables. So a television or a computer can be hooked up just with a cable. It's faster, it's more convenient from that point of view, and you have no EMFs anymore, which are exposing your body because it's traveling inside of a shielded cable. If you're going to bed, shut off your phone. Put it in flight mode if you cannot turn it off and you still use it as an alarm clock and you don't want to spend the $10 on buying an actual alarm clock. So you have the conscious choices, and something which has become for me already very normal, but I think it's important to point it out, is use less telephone calls. I cannot remember when I had the last time the phone on my ear with a normal 4G or even would be speaking of a 5G signal. I can't remember how many years ago that was. I'm using a voice message or I'm using a headphone, which is even not a normal headphone, but those air tubes.
Wired, yeah, I've got those.
Yeah, which are basically completely EMF-free headphones. And so I'm using those when I'm making telephone calls, and otherwise I'm sending out voice messages. I record them and then I put the phone away and then it's uploading. And I have the very minimum amount of radiation exposure by that. So having a conscious awareness and handling of your devices, reducing the EMF exposure from your Wi-Fi routers and things like that are very first solutions which you can do for free by just being mindful.
I once had an audit of my home with someone who had a device that could measure the magnetic waves and the EMFs around. And the oven and the hob, the induction hob, were quite high when they were left on. They weren't even in use. They were just on standby. They were technically off. Yes. But the amount of magnetic frequency that they were emitting was quite high.
Yes.
And once I turned it off at the source, it went right back down. So now my practice is, obviously I'm not going to be hanging around my oven the whole day. So it's not like I'm going to be there all the time. But if it's not in use and I'm in the kitchen, I like to make sure that at least I'm minimizing it from there. And then turning off devices from the plug, but the switch and the plug. Yes. Instead of just leaving the switch on, because that's still an active form of EMF, yes. Isn't it?
Yes. And it's the lower form. And this is the variety of the radiation spectrum. You have all kinds of sources. You have your microwave, you have just your electricity, which is running through the walls. And you have your power, and then you have Wi-Fi and phones and so on. Something what I have concentrated on most with my research is the higher frequency parts. And that's what I see where there's the biggest problems and where most people find the underestimation.
The high frequencies are, for people who don't know, the 5G and the Wi-Fi's?
Yes, for example.
Okay.
Yes. So we have started to include everything which is starting to be wireless, where there is some kind of communication technology behind, is usually starting nowadays at 1800 megahertz. And it's something which is very mind-boggling to see that there is a lot of conflict of interest, and that still also the telecommunication industry is paying for studies, and then they show no results because they have a review rights for the studies.
Interesting.
And when you're seeing the studies which are being done without any money interest from governments which have completely paid them, or private institutions which have taken out the right to audit it before, then you see some massive problems with the results of what they cause. And this is this kind of fight which is always happening over this topic in the research. I find it almost a little bit distracting, while only saying you have to concentrate on the problem of heat, while more and more studies and researchers all around the globe, they are saying, okay, it's not just about the heat. It's about the problem that you're always around this, and that it's affecting every part of how your body is working, and especially hormonal system, healing of your body, and your brain waves. Just an example, if we are making one phone call before we go to bed, our brain waves are changed for the next 4 hours.
In what sense?
Our brain is not going in such a deep mode of sleeping.
Right.
It's not going in such a low waves of theta, alpha, and beta waves. It is staying in a higher brain metabolism, and it's not able to relax and process the emotions which we have been going through.
Absolutely. And those waves are essential for deep rest and for rejuvenation.
Exactly.
So if you can't get your brain into that state, then you'll constantly be in this state of being, I guess, mobilized.
I think it almost makes us humans. What is the difference between us and robots? I guess it's dreaming. It's a big part of that. We need to be able to dream, to relax, to regenerate emotions. And if our brain is always filled with emotions and never has time to reset and absorb new ones, it's very hard to be in the moment. And so just by a small phone call before the night, our brain doesn't go into this deep states of the brainwaves for 4 hours. And the brain stays with a higher metabolism and doesn't go in these regions. And this is something so subtle, something which I see in so many people, that they are having a roughly okay sleep. They don't think they need to go for sleeping pills, medications yet, but they are like, they just wake up and they're not refreshed.
Yeah.
And this is where I think most people underestimate that, and people have sleeping disorder, they know it and they try everything, but they never go to this one simple solution of reducing their own exposure. And I find it with thousands of people which I have educated on this, and I get this feedback, and when we look at sleep efficiency on their normally nowadays, almost everybody is wearing some kind of gadget where they are measuring their health data, and it shows you usually your sleep efficiency. And people which have a sleep efficiency around 60 to 70%, they get a very big boost of 10-15% sleep efficiency if they're starting to take precautions about their exposure from radiation, and they get better within like 30 days very quickly. And that is something which makes a big impact on your life quality.
Yeah, sleep's massively important in terms of healing and rest, and all sorts of magical things happen when we sleep in a proper way.
Yes.
Speaking of the gadgets, these monitors that, everybody's wearables that we've got on these days, what's the EMF levels of those?
It is quite low compared to a modern phone. But nevertheless, I like to use some gadgets from time to time, but I usually use them in also some kind of airplane mode. So I choose the models which I use. I choose them for an airplane mode. So if you're using an Aura ring, or I was also buying a different gadget without making here any commercials for them. I'm not working with them, but also with Brain Tap. And you can turn those devices into a flight mode. So you can wear it, and it's not using any communication to your device. And then in the evening, you take it off, you charge it, and then I take it out of the airplane mode and the data is synchronizing. And I'm not there to be interrupting that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, so it's again just your own conscious choice of how you handle those things.
Right.
And it's the same with a Apple Watch. If you want to be a fan of something like this, or a smartwatch, you can turn those into an airplane mode. You can record your data and synchronize the data later by choice when you're not in between your devices.
Interesting.
And this is a way of, for instance, measuring you, keeping track of your health, but also having a lower amount of exposure.
Exposure, yeah. So you're, like you said, you're mindfully approaching how you consume the tech, because it's not going to go anywhere. And some of them really help in terms of giving us vital information about how we can improve our health.
Exactly.
So we don't want to cancel it out by doing something else, but it's about how you approach it and the way that you use it in a conscientious way.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
And the amount still of the power and the battery which is inside, I find that a very limited exposure. There is not so much effects on you. And if I wear some tracking device, I usually wear it on the right side of the body, because you have actually less meridians there which are affected by your body. So also a very small thing. You can wear your electronics on the right arm where you have less impact on your health than versus on your left.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so to recap, so far we've got some really juicy details. We've got, minimize exposure to Wi-Fi at home. We've got wired devices instead of cable-free devices, wireless devices. God, can't believe I just forgot that word. And then we've got looking at how you can turn off electricity from the power point, although that's quite low, but it's still something.
Yes.
I'm assuming turning off Bluetooth on our phones as well is a big one.
Yes.
But that's actually turning it off from the settings, not from the shortcut, because I remember when I measured it again, see, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to this, it was still emitting.
Yes, that happens also with the Wi-Fi routers. I see that many times. I found people that they were programming the Wi-Fi routers to shutting them off at night, and they were actually just not anymore giving access to allow to the signal,
Wi-Fi.
But the field strength was still completely there.
Yeah, because you can buy these timers, right?
I'm using usually the electric plugs with a clock on them, so that I can set a time, for instance, on our Wi-Fi. I can set a time that it's shutting off from 10 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning, and the power to the router is completely shut off. Very easy solution. Very few bucks, and you can actually do some very good impact on your health.
Amazing. Speaking of impact on health, I want to talk about your invention.
Thank you.
So I remember you spoke about it at the event that we met at, and I was blown away by the power of this technology that you've created.
It's a device which is based on a technology which we came up with and which we started to research in 2007. And it was the possibility to use liquids to interact and reduce the effects from EMFs on any biological organism, including us humans. And so we started this with my family together to research that in 2007 around, and we played around with that possibility and started to build prototypes and gave them to electrosensitive persons like myself. And then first, when we changed to the liquid, functionality parts, that's when the people didn't want to return anymore any prototypes, and that was waking us, awakening
because it was working,
us.
assumingly.
Yes, it was showing you something. If you have a customer which you give something to try, and then they don't want to give it back to you, then you got something nice. And that was around 8 years before the University of Athens has really dig deeper into the same principle which we have started to use, but we had some heads up start about this research. And so we found out a way to depolarize EMFs, as the university calls it. So which basically means you're making your normal radiation more natural again.
You're softening the waves in layman's terms.
And you're spreading them out from a small area on a big area.
Okay.
And this means the field strength drops. And what this means is that this technology is literally a radiation protection technology. Because by any definition, and if you go to the public sources, if you want to do something good for your health, that means lower the amount of field strength which you're exposed to a constant time.
Okay.
So that means having your Wi-Fi off, for example, is a way of mitigating and lowering your EMF fields which you're exposed to. But you cannot go to the cell phone tower around the corner. At least I have never found there a power off switch. And that's a problem. And so this device which I have created there, this helps you to do that. So you place it inside, and the waves which also come from outside, they're being distributed and they're being reduced. And that can be quite large. So we have measured that in all kinds of frequencies for 4G, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and 5G. And the effects are something between 30% is usually the average effect when you're placing a device in your home. What is the reduction of the field strength in your home? And that can help you be in the safety limits. And that's really helpful already. But the most interesting part is where it came to me is it allows you to still use some technology or the technology normally, basically. But the university found out if you have this changed and let's say, like you said, smoothened or softened radiation left in your room, then you don't have any more this health side effects.
Right.
And that is groundbreaking when they found at the university that they found a way you can broadcast even radiation. And this is one of my missions, to educate now governments and speaking with governments to say, okay, you can actually send out less harmful radiation from the cell phone towers in the first place. And as long as they are not doing that, we have right now a technology which helps you. You put it into your bedroom, for example, and it helps you to smoothen them out. And then you don't anymore have, for instance, those problems on your health effects, as our studies show.
That's great. I can see it on the table. Can I touch it?
Please.
Yeah, I'm gonna. First of all, the design is fab. I love the design. It's so lovely. And I could see on your website that it comes in different sort of tones as well.
Yes, we have a light color tone and a darker one. And this is now my personal one, which has been in the use for 5-6 years. So you see how it looks a little bit worn off, but I think it still looks beautiful after.
It's beautiful. It's like
after traveling for 100 countries.
You take this with you wherever you go.
It is in my backpack.
Wow. That's wonderful. What kind of area would this cover in terms of space?
This covers in meters, it's around 2.5 meters, which it has an area of effect with. So what is that? I guess in feet, that would be around 8-9 feet in a round way. It has its depolarization effects there. And this is now currently the most studied radiation protection device in the world. So what we have focused on with Waveguard and what I have initiated was the most amount of studies, because this is an area where people need some protection and where they need help and they are fighting something invisible. So going for studies and really reaching out to the best institutions and going this path was really important for me, so that people know and have something which they can trust and that they feel safe about.
And the other devices that you sell, presumably they cover bigger spans of space.
Yes, we have then our most common unit, which is the key home, which is covering small to medium size home.
And in terms of measuring the difference that it makes, I'm sure you've done a lot of studies around it. Do you have any stats or things that you can show us in terms of the difference before and after?
Yes, I'd love to. So the thing is that most devices which are out there and trying to go for the same mission, they can never measure effects. And that is difference. That is the big difference with Waveguard. So what we have done is, you have, for instance, talked before, I think, about measuring with an EMF meter at your home, right?
Yeah.
And so we have taken the kind of same system, but just in a more elite way. And we have gone to the most technical and prestige institutions in the world and asked exactly for professional tri-field measuring, if you so want to call it that way.
Okay, what does that mean in like basic terms?
You're in a shielded room, so you only have this EMFs inside, which which you produce now. You produce now a certain amount of EMF in this room. In
a controlled space.
And you have a controlled space and you know exactly what you are measuring.
Okay.
So it's not anymore measuring everything and you don't know from where it comes now from exactly, but you have it completely analyzed and no more blind spots basically in your measuring. And then you have the engineers, and so they have an antenna and a receiver. And so they produce, for instance, a Wi-Fi frequency or a mobile phone frequency inside of this room. And then they see, okay, it has now this amount of power at a frequency of, for instance, 2,400 megahertz. And this would be, for instance, our Wi-Fi frequency. And then we put a device inside, and then the sensor is picking up less of an electromagnetic field. And this is what the sensors is registering. And therefore, we see how much the electromagnetic field is reduced.
Okay.
And this can look, for instance, something like this.
Okay.
Like I was bringing for you, one of the outpoles.
Okay, so on your screens right now, for those of you watching, you'll see a couple of graphs that appear. And Hagen's just going to talk us through these graphs and what they mean.
Yes. So here we have been measuring the European and the American cell phone signals. I think this one is now 1800 megahertz, should be written up in the left up corner. Yes. So, and we are seeing that we can produce there a field strength of, for instance, 3 volt meters, which is being produced. And so it's a stable baseline, which is being established there, as you can see. And then in the second graph, which we're seeing in the same spec, we see the second line. I think the calibration we have there in violet, and then we have the red one. And so the red one is showing the data which is being collected after we placed a key device inside of the room. So everything stays the same. The sensor is still transmitting the same amount of data, the same amount of an electromagnetic field. And by the device coming inside, we are seeing there a reduction from 3 volt meters to roughly 1 volt meter, which is actually then completely in the safety limits again.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is basically showing us, and this is still way of plentiful of having a cell phone call, of still having, any kind of opening and browsing and using your devices. But this is, again, half of the safety standard which is being recommended. So 3 volt meters would be already too high. Usually in most countries, the safety limits is 2 volt meters, which we have. And that there are studies which show it should be much lower. And now in the real case scenarios, it's more likely that we are over exceeding those limits very often in most countries, in the real life scenarios. And so this device helps you again to bring this into the safety limits by changing it, by
reducing it essentially.
Yes, but it's also smoothened out. And the more important effect is, what is the radiation still doing? What is left? And there's something really special, which I'm really proud of, which I want to show you. And this is this second study. This is about 5G. When I was studying the effects of 5G. And obviously about me educating, and my job is to educate people about EMFs. When the 5G was launching, everybody was asking me, how dangerous is this? What is happening here? You know, is it really as bad as everybody says? And the problem was I couldn't answer it really, because there was not one study. There was not one study in the world which was telling and showing or even investigating just the possibility of negative effects, of any effects on our health. There was not one study when it was being rolled out. It was mind-blowing to me that there would be something rolled out where there's already a big movement and people are like, is this safe? Is it not safe? Not everybody is sure what's going on. And then we are launching the next huge technology. And so I thought this cannot be like this. So I was going on the mission, and it was a difficult one to come to the possibility to study 5G because it was not launched yet and nobody gave you access to it. The telecommunication industry had the exclusive rights to produce 5G networks. And so they would have needed to give you the allowance to study it. And
which they weren't about to do.
They were not about to do that, exactly. And so that was difficult. And so then in the end, I came through and I was able to produce the first 5G study and ever done. And we published it. And you're holding that one there. And what it was showing and finding was, that was just amazing. It was looking at human skin cells, fibroblast cells. And I just have here literally the last parts of my kitchen knife cut in my finger. And this is a normal healing process in our body. And this is basically what the study is showing, a healing process in our human skin. And so we were looking exactly there. You see this.
Okay.
We were using human skins. We put them in a small Petri dish, as it's called. And then you have a small silicone stripe in the middle, which is basically representing the size of the wound. And then you have the cells on both sides, human skin cells. And they are going to try to replicate themselves, to close the wound, to close again the gap in between them. Mm-hmm. And this is what we're seeing here. And so what we found is that if you have no EMFs inside of the room, the healing time takes 24 hours for this size of a wound. If you're having just a 5G signal inside of the room, not even directly affecting the cells, just inside of the room, the healing time went up to almost 4 days.
4 days? I thought you were going to say, like, I don't know, 48 hours.
Almost 96 hours.
Wow.
The healing time went up.
It slowed down the regeneration of the cells.
And we are having so many healing processes inside of our body every day. And skin is just one part of that. Mm-hmm. And we're fighting each day 20,000 cancer cells in our body. We're having healing of our body in each part of our body every day. And if we see that one healing process, our most basic one, our skin, is being extended and disturbed by almost 400%, it was mind-blowing to me.
Very eye-opening.
And it was completely mind-blowing to me. And we also included there then our depolarization technology from the key shield. And there the healing time was back to 26 hours instead of 24.
Right.
And we repeated this experiment 13 times to make sure that we didn't find a one-time coincidence. And now we are also replicating that with universities around the world, which have been contacting us because this was groundbreaking. And they were saying, we have also to validate this. This is so massive result. And so this was something which was really standing out to me. But this is exactly also what the university was finding already in 2015, that if you depolarize EMFs, what is left of inside of the signal is not anymore so harmful. And this was very much showing this and pointing this out, that we are following this principle. So Waveguard stands on this part that we follow this principle, which the university has found. We are using it. We have been verified by very prestigious institutions that we are doing this successfully and that you can measure that the field strength is lower. And then especially important for me was, what is left? Is this still dangerous or not? And we found out, okay, it's almost as if you are not using it at all, like this study was showing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for bringing this into the world. I think it's something that we could all use clearly. And I think that the tips that you've provided are very useful because not everybody has the ability to access these kind of devices or guards immediately. So the way in which we move and practice consciousness and awareness around these devices is really useful. So I really appreciate the EMF coach giving us all of those tips for today.
Thank you.
But more importantly, it was really eye-opening to see how things are progressing. And it gives me hope to think that at least there are conversations around this being had. And there will always be skeptics and there'll always be, one fighting the other or one side believing their side is the truth. But I think as long as there's a dialogue around it, then we can try and exercise awareness that people are comfortable with as well. Because not everybody's going to go live in a cave.
Yes.
But at least we give everybody the choice to make a decision of how they consume technology, which is better than nothing at all.
Yes. And you have ways to protect yourself. And I think people should be more open to their thinking about and looking into this part, that they have some problems in their health, which they're trying to figure out, which they're trying to get rid of, and they never associate it with radiation. And I think this is what's most about that I hear this story so many times, that people have chronic sleeping disorder, for example, or headaches or depression, or they have a problem with their hormonal balances. And they're starting to take care of this one issue, and suddenly all works. And it's
Things
falling
fall
back
place.
into their place, and they never knew that they had something which is manipulating them so much, because this is this invisible danger, and it's having these effects which we don't smell, which we don't taste, which we don't
Invisible,
see.
yeah.
And that's why we are not conscious about it. And that's exactly why we need to take some actions, and we need to also research it a bit and play around with this kind of possibilities and look at your sleep efficiency.
Yeah.
And try to see, are you affected by this? And if your sleep efficiency goes up by 10% by turning your devices off at nights, that's amazing. You're going to have an hour of more sleep for the rest of your life by saving electricity and money. It doesn't get better.
Yeah,
so I think that's
very true.
People should try it.
Thanks for sharing that. So other than this wonderful key shield in your life, what are the other practices that keep you grounded, that keep you sane when everything's going a little bit crazy and the world around you feels very heated, pardon the pun?
I like to go out in nature, and I like to go hiking. And yesterday I was taking a dive, and so I completely went into the world of the sea world, and which is always a good way, because it's always where we're depolarized, right? It's the solution which the university found, so you can go diving and you have exactly the same effect. So you're protected there, and it's good, and you have this completely different universe where you forget everything. This is something which I very much enjoy, which is giving me some balance. And obviously, working on your dream is something which is keeping you motivated, and which is keeping you not feel so drained from work.
Yeah, that's a good amount of things to have under your belt.
Yeah. So I like this kind of nature exercises, like biking and hiking and taking ice baths and sauna and take a dives. This is kind of like my recovery.
Amazing. And I always like to think of it as, I love barefoot walking on the grass. And I don't know whether it's true or not, but I saw this thing on Instagram the other day where they put the grass cells under a microscope and they all look like smiley faces. I'm pretty sure they were targeting me because they know that I like smiley face emojis. But I just thought, isn't it wonderful to think that nature has that kind of like vibe that it's giving back to you when you're interacting with it? And I really feel it. There's something magical about being out there in the
open. It is
open.
extremely powerful to use grounding as a kind of way of recovering. It has this kind of, I guess, trinity of a connection to us, that it has our effect on our soul, spirit, and body.
Yeah.
It helps by giving off the protons from your body and recharging electrons, basically, until you're electrical neutral. And you have this kind of, sensation and relaxation feeling, which it's stimulating. And you just really feel, again, connected to Earth, which grounds you and which humbles you in a way and makes you feel, again, like being you. And so it has those three effects. And for me, it was mind-blowing when I came here to Dubai, and I was immediately trying to replicate that. And this is what it's again showing. We need to go out into deeper levels of nature. Even when you're going here in Dubai to the close water of the city, you're positively charged water, which is almost so difficult to reach. And the same with the ground. If you're going in big cities barefoot in a Central Park in New York, for example, or just inside of the city, you will not anymore reach grounding on the earth. It's something to be aware about. So you need to go into more distinct nature areas where the earth has also more power, because we have so many power lines that even our earth is not anymore giving us this healing power. We need to go into the nature again and
deeper
into the ocean or water to get those effects again.
Hagen, it's been amazing having you on the show and incredibly informative. Thank you for all of those stats, that information. I mean, there's a lot to mull over and ponder. So I really appreciate your time. It's been wonderful. I always like ending the show with 2 questions. So before you go, I'm going to ask you if you had a song that epitomizes the phase that you're in right now, what would it be and why?
I like very much, for instance, the songs from Eddie Vedder, which he was producing for the movie Into the Wild.
Wow, that is a film.
Yeah, and they're the song Society. That is one of my songs which puts me right into this time again, when I was in the nature and when I was living for a couple of months completely, disconnected from the normal society. And so that is something special which takes me back there, and I love this song.
Amazing. Thank you. I'll be sure to add it to the Mindful Makers playlist at the end of the year, because I'm collecting everybody's song. So I'm going to make sure that each person that appeared on the show will have their song on the playlist on Spotify.
That's so nice.
And the last question is, if you could take one item to the moon with you, what would it be and why?
I think I would take a book with me. I have too little time to read, and I think to fly there and back would be an amazing opportunity to be disconnected and just really take your time for yourself. I think picking my favorite book, which was too big to read, would be something I would really enjoy on that trip.
Can I ask you what book it is?
Right now, that is Parenting, a book, Boundless Parenting from Ben Greenfield's.
Nice.
That is what I think I would take.
Well, we could always give you extra options if you decide at the last minute to change them. So I'll make sure that we give those instructions to our pilot.
Thank you so much.
But Hagen, thank you again for coming on the show and for sharing these insights. Congratulations on winning Invention of the Year for the Key Shield. It's for Key Shield, right?
For the key technology, which is in the 3 products from our company, yes. Yeah,
congratulations. I think it's a massive step in creating the right kind of awareness and to helping lives and improving our well-being. So I really congratulate you on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Pleasure. If you'd like to know more about Hagen and his work, I'll put all the links in the show notes, so head there and start exploring. You'll also find an exclusive discount code, which is mindful and applicable on all purchases on Waveguard. And to know more about EMFs and the influence of EMFs in architecture, be sure to listen to the episode of Valentina Chereda in Season 1, which is also linked in the show notes. And if you fancy taking this journey further, then check us out on Instagram and remember to follow, like, subscribe, and comment on the show, as it really helps to nourish the community. And I personally love hearing from you. Until next time, stay open, stay mindful, and I'll catch you on the flip side.